Who's going to stop them? Who's going to stop them? That's what we should be asking ourselves. Because if they're sending out people without due process or without being found guilty with whatever little due process they were given, what's going to stop them from coming after you next? Straight from the White House, just mocking their disdain for the law. Quote, you don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. And this is so accurate too, because most of these brown men originate from Venezuela, and they're being sent out to El Salvador, to one of their dungeons out there, never to be seen from again. So let's go through this. Trump administration deports hundreds of immigrants even as a judge orders their removals be stopped. Remember, they have not had proper due process. This can be you. U.S. citizens have been rounded up simply for the way that they look in the past. It can happen again. Please look into Operation Wetbag, where countless of Mexican nationals that were allowed to be here were gathered up and shipped back to Mexico in trains. And within those Mexican nationals were U.S. citizens that were not given due process either and made to find their way back on their own, simply for being brown men, for speaking Spanish. All right. So, the judge blocked Donald Trump's deportation. This is Judge Boasberg with a temporary block. And he had originally ordered both planes, one that was headed to El Salvador and the other one that's not really spoken on, to Honduras, to return. See, Trump is trying to use the Alien Enemies Act of 1789, and in a lot of the ways, making the liberal dream of having another FDR come true. Why? Because FDR was the last president to use this during World War II for the Japanese internment camps, aka the Japanese concentration camps. This is, in a way, what liberals have been wanting. The return of FDR. It just so happens to be the FDR that they don't like to talk about. You know, the side that they're like, drastic measures, World War II. You put U.S. citizens in a concentration camp based on their ethnicity. That's your hero. And remember, even economically speaking, FDR was meant to save capitalism. Meant to save capitalism and get rid of the radical communists, the radical socialists, the radical anarchists, to save capitalism. So be careful what you wish for, because you got it. You got it, libs. You got it. This would be hysterical if it wasn't so atrocious. If this actually affected white liberals that yearn for FDR, but it doesn't. It affects my family members. It affects people that look like me. And potentially, it can literally affect me as well. So let's go over some of these pathetic quotes from the White House press secretary, stating the administration did not refuse to comply with a court order. The order, which had no lawful basis, was issued after terrorists from Tren de Aragua aliens had already been removed from U.S. territory. Please remember this, because time and time again, these morons will state a version of this as if somehow magically, once a U.S. plane is out of U.S. territory, the president cannot do anything to contact them, and somehow these individuals will refuse to listen to any direct order given to them. Like, I don't know, return come back? No. Incapable of doing that somehow magically. Never explained. Never explained. Even Trump himself, the coward, saying, I don't know. You have to speak to the lawyers about that. He said, although he defended the deportations, stating, I can tell you this. These were bad people. When asked about invoking presidential powers used in time of war, Trump said, this is a time of war, describing the influx of criminal migrants as an invasion. This has, the great replacement theory all over it. And we're going to go over Stephen Miller in a bit. But first, we even have other heads of state mocking the illusion of a U.S. checks and balance. They know our courts cannot do anything to pull back the power of the president or, at the very least, hold him accountable. From Bukele himself stating, whoopsie, too late. Whoopsie, too late. Shameless. These fascists, they know how to hype each other up. They know how to mock the rule of law because they know nothing can stop them. Now, Bukele had agreed to house about 300 immigrants for a year at the cost of $6 million in his country's prison. Secretary of State Marco Rubio stated, we sent over 250 alien enemy members of Tren de Aragua, which El Salvador has agreed to hold in their very good jails at a fair price that will save our taxpayer money. Somehow Trump has affected the linguistic capabilities of these individuals. It's, come on. Very good jails. They're dungeons. But even if they weren't very good jails, now for the fair price, whenever a reactionary tells you, oh, we got a good deal for the taxpayer, they're lying to you. They're playing you. They're lying to you. Let's look at this briefly. I didn't see it get enough attention. But from CNN, Trump plan to house migrants at Guantanamo Bay faces mounting hurdles, internal doubts. And remember, Obama promised in his campaign to close down Guantanamo Bay. And like the coward that he is, the con man that he was, here we are. What's hilarious about this, as Marco Rubio was saying, oh yeah, the taxpayer, we're going to save him a pretty penny. Right. So the administration has already spent roughly $16 million on the operation, according to Democratic Representative Sarah Jacob, who visited last week as part of a congressional delegation visit. Quote, what we saw really was that there is very low capacity there, and it's really expensive, and I could see no operational reason for using Guantanamo Bay for immigration detention. It is clearly just because Donald Trump liked the optics. It's all about putting on a show. It's all about putting on a show for Donald Trump. It's a circus. It's an absolute circus, and that's what Euro-American backwardness craves. That's what they crave. That's what they call for. That's what they yearn for. To be entertained. And nothing is more entertaining for the settlers than to see brown and black people suffer. To see their agency removed and stripped from them, especially with no due process. This is what they voted for. This is what they wanted, and they're happy with it. All these town halls that you're seeing, where they're raging out, they're upset because it's affecting them financially. Financially, they don't care about this. And to the extent that they do, they applaud it. All right, this is even more embarrassing. We'll go down a little further. Here we go. Jacobs told CNN that of the money spent by the DoD, $3.1 million was spent solely on setting up tent structures, which ultimately were not in use and still not operational. As of now, the tents that were set up at the naval base are expected to be left up for potential use during hurricane season. $3.1 million down the drain for tents that aren't even being used. Thank you, Marco Rubio. Thank you for thinking about the taxpayer. This is ridiculous. I mean, and again, you have to laugh because even in their warped sense of reality, it makes no sense. It makes no sense. This is purely for show, for an act of cruelty. All right. But talking about that, it's all fun and games, but actually people are getting hurt because of this. Conditions at the facilities have come under scrutiny. Some detainees have refused meals, which has led to weight loss. The U.S. military officer overseeing the task force in charge of detention operations at Guantanamo Bay, Lieutenant Colonel Robert Green, said in court documents. Greens also said a restraint chair was used 6 times. 6 times on February 28th. Each time because of a Venezuelan detainees who were engaging in self-harm. Presumably out of protest, out of desperation. Do you think they're going to care in El Salvador and their dungeons? Absolutely not, because body after body is coming up without proper investigation. And believe me, that is a perk to Donald Trump, to Marco Rubio, to Stephen Miller. Okay, let's continue here. From Axios. How the White House ignored a judge's order to turn back deportation flights, and here is the ghoul himself. And this is such an appropriate picture from one monster to the next. Okay. How it happened. White House Deputy Chief of Staff, Stephen Miller, orchestrated the process in the West Wing in tandem with Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem. Kristi Noem. Ask her how she feels about Native Americans. Few outside their teams knew what was happening. They didn't actually set out to defy a court order. No, they didn't want to defy it. They were trying to avoid it completely. They were trying to circumnavigate it from the jump. We wanted them on the ground first before a judge could get the case. But this is how it worked out. So they're basically saying, hey, we'd rather ask for forgiveness than ask for permission. But they don't even have to ask for forgiveness because nobody's going to punish them. Nobody's going to hold them accountable. Okay, it goes on. Here's the timeline. The president signed the executive order invoking the Alien Enemies Act on Friday night, but intentionally did not advertise it. When does Donald Trump miss an opportunity to advertise any of his actions? Any of his actions at all? Whether he uses his left or right hand to wipe, he'll advertise it. This is who he is. So please understand, this was done maliciously. On Saturday morning, word of the order leaked, officials said, prompting a mad scramble to get the planes in the air. Because again, somehow magically, when they're in the air, that's it. They're their own sentient beings, independent of any restraint, any ability to listen to the White House. They're gone. They're magically gone. There's nothing the state can do to bring them back. That's their argument. That's their pathetic, ridiculous argument. It's like children. Oh, there it goes. We can't do anything to stop it. It's like, I don't know what's more pathetic. The excuse they came up with or the fact that the courts are going to have to uphold this. Because there's no way that they could do anything to hold Donald Trump accountable. So they'll uphold this just to save face. And if they don't, how they're going to enforce it? I mean, go back to Andrew Jackson. How will the courts enforce their rulings on the president and his administration? They can't. They can't. It's just for show. Please remember, the president, any president, could have done this. Because there really is no restraint on the presidency. And If you think this is just a Republican issue, please remember it was Joe Biden who was pushing to expand the powers of the presidency when it comes to the border. And it was Donald Trump's pursuit of power that prevented that from occurring. It was Lindsey Graham, the Klansman himself, that was telling his Republican colleagues, please pass this, even if we have Republicans controlling everything. We cannot get a better deal than this that wouldn't include a pathway to citizenship. From Lindsey Graham, the Klansman himself. And now you have AOC rewriting history and clamoring that it would have been a great bill passed by Joe Biden. The Democrats always laying the pathway for Republicans to gain more power and more power. Okay, back to this though. Hours later, during a court hearing filed by the ACLU, Boasberg, the judge, ordered a halt to the deportations and said any flight should be turned around mid-air. This is something that you need to make sure is complied with immediately, he told the Justice Department. At about 6:51 p.m., both flights were off the Yucatan Peninsula, according to their flight paths. And again, somehow, some way, they can't listen to the president. They can't take any orders once they're outside of U.S. territory. Inside the White House, officials discussed whether to order the planes to turn around. On advice from a team of administration lawyers, the administration pressed ahead. Quote, there was a discussion about how far the judge's ruling can go under circumstances and over international waters. And on advice of counsel, we proceeded with deporting these thugs. They were already outside of U.S. airspace. What could we do? What could we possibly do to get them to return, right? We believe the order is not applicable. But here we go. The Trump administration was already spoiling for a fight over the Alien Enemies Act, one of several fronts on which they believe legal challenges to the president's authority will only end up strengthening it when the Supreme Court rules in its favor. Officially, the Trump White House is not denying it ignored the judge's orders. Why would they? Why would they have to deny this? Doesn't matter to them. There'll be no repercussions. And instead wants to shift the argument to whether it was right to expel alleged members of Tren de Aragua. Again, alleged. Alleged, because they weren't given their day in court. No due process was given. That's why it's alleged. This can happen to you, to me. Well, depends, right? Depends on what you look like and how you sound when you speak. All right. So what do we know about where they were sent? CECOT, in El Salvador's mega prison for gang members. And apparently alleged gang members as well. All right. This was built in 2023, and it's a terrorism confinement center. It can hold up to about 40,000 individuals, and we're seeing about 65 to 70 each in a cell. And we're talking about 2 bathrooms per cell. There are no workshops or educational programs. So in other words, there's not even the illusion of rehabilitation for these individuals. In fact, Bukele's own justice minister has basically come out and said these individuals will never return to their communities. That's why I'm calling it a dungeon. These are illuminated black sites. These individuals are never to be seen walking in public, enjoying their freedom. There is no avenue for them to be released back into the free world. Doesn't matter what they did. Doesn't matter what they're accused of and haven't been found guilty of doing. They're gone. They're gone. And people are applauding this. Look at this. Please remember, no due process was given. And this is where they're being sent to. For simply being brown men. This is how they're being treated. And you have people celebrating this. You have these Euro-American settlers with their backwards way of thinking, applauding this, yearning for more of this. To see brown and black people and their agency completely removed and stripped away from them, this brings them joy. They celebrate this. They truly believe that their lives improve when this occurs. Oh no, it's not a concentration camp. Of course not. How could it be, right? So, if we look at what this article from NPR references, we'll go straight to the source. Cristo Sal. Silence is not an option. Executive summary. Please do yourself a favor. It's not enough to watch these clips. You have to do some of the reading on your own, preferably all of it. But you have to read this in its entirety. It is chilling. El Salvador has been in a state of exception since 2022, and on January of this year, it was extended for the 35th time. Now keep in mind, at least 265 people have died in state custody. Please read this in its entirety. We'll go over this here. The research then focused on primary source data, including more than 478 testimonies and interviews with family members, funeral home employees, and other sources, including burial and exhumation records, autopsies and medical reports, birth and death certificates, etc. A forensics doctor reviewed and analyzed autopsy records from Salvadoran Institute of Forensic Medicine, death reports, photographs, and interviews. Finally, Crisosal used qualitative analysis to verify deaths and examine the broader context of human rights violations under the state of exception. I cannot emphasize enough that you need to read this in its entirety. But just for a quick overview, we'll go down here where it states, Crisosal verified the death of 265 people in state custody or shortly after their release, including 244 men, 17 women, and for all the pro-lifers applauding this rise of fascism, 4 recently born children. 4 recently born children. Absolutely atrocious. And there's fear. There's a state of fear in El Salvador. And it's not just for these quote-unquote criminals. The investigation found that family members avoid reporting or even talking about the deaths of their relatives detained for fear of reprisals. Some of the incarcerated people interviewed said that prison authorities were using mass graves to bury deceased detainees. Fascism always leads to mass graves. Due to the limited access to information of what is happening within the prisons, the number of deaths of detainees under the state of exception is likely to be much higher than the 265 cases investigated by Crisosal. The state, however, continued to deny these claims. Atrocious. And of course, back to Donald Trump and his administration, they're already crying. The development escalates the task of a district court's inappropriate exercise of jurisdiction and the risk that the district court may force the government to disclose sensitive national security and operational security concerns or face significant penalties from the court. The government cannot and will not be forced to answer sensitive questions of national security and foreign relations in a rushed posture without orderly briefing and a showing that these questions are somehow material to a live issue. And yet, the individuals, the brown men that they shipped out, did not have their day in court, were not given due process, but of course, these white tears, they always want to violate the rights of others, especially black and brown men. but they want special treatment. And they're always crying. It's always something. Literally stating, this court should also immediately reassign this case to another district court judge given the highly unusual and improper procedures. For example, the certification of a class action involving members of a designated foreign terrorist organization in less than 18 hours with no discovery and no briefing from the government. They're crying about discoveries and briefings for themselves. What about the individuals that you just sent to a dungeon in El Salvador? Disgusting. Let's hear what the border czar has to say about this. Just spitting at the face of the legislative. There is nothing the courts can do to hold these animals back. And there's nothing that they can do to stop them from coming for you. Keep that in mind.
What's next? Because I'm getting a little worried about the manpower. These guys they have to be tired.
That's what he's concerned about. Not violating human rights, not denying somebody due process. He's concerned if the state's people are tired of those kidnapping and exporting human beings to dungeons. If they're tired, if they're sleepy. How cute.
You got 30 guys in the stack going on different busts every single day. You're going to run out of money. It doesn't look like you're getting support from the Democrats on this. You're going against the judges now. What's next?
Another flight. Another flight every day. The teams are going to be out there every day. Every day, the men and women of ICE are going to be in the neighborhoods of this nation arresting criminal, illegal alien, public safety threats, and national security threats. Lawrence, you're not going to stop us. We made a promise to the American people. The President Trump has made a promise to American people. We're going to make this country safe again. I wake up every morning loving my job because I work for the greatest president in the history of my life, and we're going to make this country safe again. I'm proud to be a part of this administration. We're not stopping. I don't care what the judges think. I don't care what the left thinks. We're coming.
So there you have it. He doesn't care what the courts have to say. He doesn't care what any judge has to say. Because he is in the cult of Donald Trump. He is in the cult of Donald Trump, and they depend on this Christian white nationalist fervor. And nothing makes these backwards Europeans here more happy than to see their government, their state, abuse black and brown people. They applaud this. They want more of this. And of course, you have that vendido worried about the financial impact of this. And please understand, don't believe the hype. People in El Salvador have been opposing this fascistic rule. Again, remember, the state of exception was extended for the 35th time. They've been under it since 2022. People are being disappeared.
Muchos que están muriendo. Nosotros estamos con aquello de el de nosotros estará bien o ya habrá fallecido, porque muchos casos así se están dando y están saliendo en los medios.
Y'all really think that all these individuals, they have family members that were brutal murderers and rapists? Is this how you behave when somebody that is considered a terrorist by the community is kidnapped? Of course not. But under the state of exception, again, that they've been under since 2022, that's been extended for the 35th time this year, the state has full control. All they need is an accusation, and they don't have to provide any due process to incarcerate and strip these people of their human rights. And it can happen here. We're already seeing the symbiosis between the United States and El Salvador, between Bukele and Donald Trump. If they're denying due process for a certain group of human beings, they'll deny it for you and me. They've done it before. They'll do it again. Ya estuvo.